On Writing by Stephen King. Most people have at least some talent as writer and storytellers, and that those talents can be strengthened and sharpened with practice. The writer's original perception of character or characters may be as erroneous as the reader's. Stopping a piece of work just because it's hard, either emotionally or imaginatively, is a bad idea. Write with the door closed. Rewrite with the door open. Writing is a lonely job. Having someone who believes in you makes a lot of difference. Put your desk in the corner, and every time you sit down there to write, remind yourself why it isn't in the middle of the room. Life isn't a support system for art. It's the other way around. One of the really bad things you can do to your writing is to dress up the vocabulary, looking for long words because you are maybe a little bit ashamed of your short ones. Remember that the basic rule of vocabulary is use the first word that comes to your mind, if it is appropriate and also colorful. Stephen believes most people have at least some talent as writer and storyteller, and that those talents can be sharpened with practice. Why he said write with the door closed, rewrite with the door open. Your stuff start with being just for you. In other words, but then it goes out. Once you know what is the story is and get it right as you can anyway, it belongs to anyone who wants to read it or criticize it. And also he mentioned that writing is a lonely job. Why? Having someone who believes in you makes a lot of difference. Why he's saying that? They don't have to make speeches. Just believing in usually enough. The most important Stephen learned from Carrie White is that the writer's original perception of her character or characters may be as erroneous as the reader's. Writing a close second was the realization that stopping a piece of work just because it's hard, either emotionally or imaginatively, is a bad idea. Sometimes you have to go on when you don't feel like that. And sometimes you are doing good work when it feels like all you are managing into shovel shit for a sitting position. Writing, start with this. Put your desk in the corner, and every time you sit down to write, remind yourself why it isn't in the middle of the room. Life isn't support system for art. It's the other way around. I repeated the sentences. Why? We have to know the things again and again. One of the really bad things you can do to your writing is to dress up the vocabulary, looking for long words because you are maybe a little bit ashamed of your short ones. This is like dressing up a household pet in evening clothes. The pet is embarrassed, and the person who committed this act of premeditated cuteness should be even more embarrassed. Remember that the basic rule of vocabulary is use the first word that comes to your mind, if it is appropriate or colorful. If you hesitate and cogitate, you will come up with another word. Of course you will. There's always another word, but it probably won't be as good as your first one, or as close to what you really mean. Nouns and verbs are two indispensable parts of writing. Without one of each, no group of words can be a sentence, since a sentence is by definition a group of words containing a subject, noun, and a predictive verb. These strings of words begin with capital letter and with a period, and combine to make a complete thought, which makes in the writer's head and then leaps to the reader's. Take any noun, put it any verb, and you have a sentence. It never fails. Rocks explode. The simplicity of noun-verb construction is useful, very useful. At the very least, it can provide a safety net for your writing. Verbs come in two types, active and passive. With an active verb, the subject of the sentence is doing something. With a passive verb, something is being done to the subject of the sentence. The subject is just letting it happen. You should avoid the passive tense. The adverb is not your friend, so forget it. Adverbs you will remember from your own version of business English are words that modify verbs, adjectives, and also adverbs. I insist that you use that verb in dialogue attribution only in the rarest and most special of occasions, and not even then if you can avoid it. The best form of dialogue attribution is said, as he said, she said, Bill said, Monica said, something like that. You always add even when the word you are modifying ends in S. Always write Thomas bike, never Thomas apostrophe bike. If you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all others: read a lot and write a lot. There's no way around these two things that I'm aware of. No shortcut, okay? Every book you pick up has its own lesson or lessons, and quite often the bad books have more to teach than the good one. Once I start work on a project, I don't stop. I don't slow down unless I absolutely have to. If I don't write every day, the characters begin to still off in my mind. They begin to seem like characters instead of real people. What you need to remember is that there's a difference between lecturing about what you know and using it to enrich the story. The latter is good, the former is not. In my view, stories and novels consist of three parts: narration, which moves the story from point 1 to point B, and finally to point Z. Description, which creates a sensory reality for the reader, and dialogue, which brings characters to life through their speech. Description begins in the writer's imagination, but also finishes in the reader's. One of the cardinal rules of good fiction is never tell us a thing if you can show us. Everything I have said about dialogue applies to building characters in fiction. The job boils down to two things: paying attention to how the real people around you behave, and then telling the truth about what you see. Good fiction always begins with story and progresses to theme. It almost never begins with the theme and progresses to story. The most important things to remember about backstory are that, number one, everyone has a history, and number two, most of it isn't very interesting. Stick to the parts that are and don't get carried away with the rest. You don't need writing classes or seminars anymore than you need this or any other book on writing. You need best by reading a lot and writing a lot, and the most valuable lesson of all are the ones you teach yourself. Writing isn't about making money, getting famous, getting dates, getting laid, making friends. In the end, it's about enriching the lives of those who will read your work and enriching your own life as well. It's about getting up, getting well, and getting over, getting happy. Okay, getting happy.